All right, this is an introductory video into working with VR in Unreal 5. This is the starter map, starter level, and it's just got some basic elements in it. So we're using the Oculus Rift headset, Rift S, I should say, and the settings that you really want to focus on when you first get everything set up, besides walking through the basics, creating an account and all those kinds of things, is you're going to want to go to the General tab and make sure that unknown sources and OpenXR runtime are enabled. So it should say set Oculus is active in the OpenXR setting. And then obviously, if you go to devices, you should see connected on all counts. And then in VR, in Unreal, you want to make sure that when these three dots are clicked, the VR preview option is enabled, and then that allows us to hop in. So in this series of videos, I'm going to be going in and out of the headset, and I'll just quickly cover some basics here. So I'm going to click the little play button. On your screen, you'll see not a whole lot because the Oculus headset doesn't activate until you put it on your head. The controller should show up, so you should be seeing these if everything's working properly. And the thumb grip, or the grip buttons, I should say, that I'm sort of showing really closely here, should be facing inward. So when I want to teleport, I'm going to use the right thumb button. And to turn around, I'm going to use the left thumb button. So this is basically how I get around, is I push the thumbstick on the right controller forward, and then I just move the thumbstick on the left controller to either side. If I use the grip button on my controller, I can pick up objects and move them around. And then if I pick up the gun, I can shoot that. And you'll notice, by the way, that the gun orients itself automatically when I grip it. So we'll be going over that too. The cube doesn't do that, but the gun does. You'll also notice that there is a VR spectator camera in this scene that we'll cover in a little bit, which is pretty cool. But as long as you're able to do everything that I'm doing, you should be good to go. And so I'm going to hop back out. And when we're working in VR, the templates will all be set up slightly, well, I should say the levels can be set up slightly different depending on what you're doing. So in this case, we have a player start, which is right here. And this is actually what is referencing our VR Pawn headset. So we'll talk about that more in a little bit. But wherever this is placed and wherever it's positioned in terms of its rotation, that's where you're going to start in VR. So we'll cover that again in a little bit. But right now, what I want to do is create a new level that we can navigate in on our own. So I'm going to go to Basic, hit Create. Don't need to save that. Give this a second. Prepare the shaders. It's generally a good idea to not really do anything until those have completed. Kind of depends on your computer. And so I'm not going to do anything terribly fancy to this environment. I just want to cover some basic stuff. So if I want to navigate around this floor space, the first thing I need to do is I need to go to Place Actors and type in the word nav. And this is for navigation, and I want a nav mesh bounds volume. So I'm going to drag this out, and it's basically a wireframe cube. And I'm going to scale this up to encompass the area that I want to be able to navigate within. So if I drag that down and I put that into the floor and I hit the letter P, you should see a green area, and this is the navigational area for my VR project. So I can just make this as big as I want, and there's a number of controls that you can use to kind of get it to work on multiple levels and work around objects. And this nav mesh bounds volume is basically going to respect collision. So if I take a cube and I throw that in there, let's say I make that bigger, you can see that the nav mesh that I've got set up is being cut off wherever that cube is placed. And it's also giving me a little bit of a volume or an area on top of the cube. So essentially this means that I can teleport on top of that cube. Now if I took my nav mesh bounds and I moved it, up, obviously that's not going to work. I need to intersect the surface. And if I was to go very, very low with this, you'll see that I no longer have the nav mesh recognizing the top of the cube. So I can either move that up or scale that up, and then that'll show up. Now, if you have something a little more intricate in terms of the space, then what we could do, and maybe I'll cover that in the next video, is create something a little more complex, and we'll look at how to sort of tailor this a little bit better. But right now I should be able to literally hit the green play button and I will float into space. And why is that? Well, that's because while making videos I'll forget all kinds of things. So what we want to do is now go to the VR template folder, and we'll go down to blueprints, and you'll see there's this item called VR pawn. And what you want to do is left click drag that into your scene, and if I hit the G key to show the icon, I'm going to hit the letter P to hide the nav mesh volume so I don't see that green anymore. This little camera is my VR pawn. So what you need to do is select it, and then over in the details you're going to go to where it says auto possess player and change that to player 0. So now we have everything we need. So I'm going to hit the play button and I'm going to throw on the headset and test this out. Looks like I'm in business, and there we go. So I can navigate around and I can rotate and move wherever. And let's see if I can get the nav just right. Now I'm on top of the cube. So that's really the first step, is making sure that you can do all of that. So now what we could do is set up some objects that we can interact with. So we'll hop back out, hit escape, and I'm gonna just do a really simple setup. Let's say that we move this cube down. This will be our table, I guess. Maybe we'll go a little lower. And by the way, these objects, these basic objects, these represent a 1 meter cube. So if you're looking at trying to figure out a table height, we could kind of work with it that way. Let's say that's our table, and then I'll take this and scale this down. And oops, where am I? Come over here, and I can hit the end key to drop it directly onto the surface below. So let's say we give this cube a color so we can actually see it. And now what I want to do is be able to interact with this cube. So I'm going to lower my camera speed a little. I'm going to come over, with the cube selected, I'm going to come over to the details panel, And in here, this is where I'm going to slow down sometimes because buttons move around in Unreal 5. I'm going to hit the Add button, and I'm going to type the word grab. And I want to choose Grab Component. Now, when you have Grab Component selected, you'll see a few details down below, one of which is Grab Type, and it's set to Free. I'm just pointing that out because this means that I can kind of grab the cube however, and it won't orient in my hand in any particular way. There's some other options that we'll look at later on, but just note there's different ways for objects to sort of position themselves when you pick them up. So now what I need to do is go to the static mesh component itself, which is this cube. So you can see here there's like a stack, right? So in the topmost stack it says static mesh component, and what I need to do is come down and check the box that says simulate physics and make sure it'll automatically do this. When you check this box, it will change the mobility to movable. And then we want to check generate overlap events. So if everything's working great, I'm going to hit play and then test that out. Now you can see I'm a million miles away from my cube, so let's get over there pretty quick. And I'm going to reach out and use the thumbstick, the grip button, the one on the side, and you can see I can pick it up and I can let it go and so forth. Now the reason that it is dropping to the ground is because I have the physics enabled. So I'm going to hop out again. If I was to change that setting, essentially what would happen, if I go here, if I disable physics, it's still set to movable, and it still have generate overlap events on. And let's be a little smart about this. I'm going to grab my VR pawn, move that over. And now I hit play. What will happen is it'll, let me get a little closer, it'll stay in the air. Right, so enabling physics is essentially turning on gravity. Now the other thing that I didn't cover is that when you drag out your VR pawn, you want to make sure that the pawn is essentially halfway in the ground. And the reason for that is that when you're in VR, you're however tall and the next person is however tall, and you don't want to have a specific height. You want the height to match you. So that's essentially what it's doing. When you have this centered into the floor and you hit the play button, it will possess that pawn, and you will stand up, or it will basically move to the position of your head. So it understands where the floor is, and it understands how tall you are based on that. If you were to offset this by doing this and you hit play, you're going to be, 5 feet taller than you were originally. You can see like the cube is way down there now. So you want to make sure that that pawn is in the ground. All right. So that is the first step towards creating a VR project. Video 1 done.